right, mabuhay!
Mabuhay!
Magandang hapon, everyone. Welcome to today's Bold Step event, the 60th anniversary of the Delano Grape Strike. I'm Melody Sabaron Ybarra, your newly elected Delano FANHS chapter president. On behalf of the Filipino-American National Historical Society Delano chapter, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to all who contributed to the planning and celebration of this important point in history. We also thank you for participating and joining us as we commemorate the legacy of our Manongs, who played a pivotal role in organizing a historic labor movement grounded in justice, dignity, and equality. Together with fellow farm workers, they stood at the forefront of the struggle for fair working conditions and civil rights, paving the way for future generations. As a community, we continue to honor their courageous efforts and the powerful unity that sparked lasting change. Their story remains a cornerstone of the Filipino-American narrative and a guiding light in the ongoing pursuit of equity and inclusion. Maraming salamat for joining us in this celebration of history, heritage, and hope. Again, mabuhay! Enjoy the day and leave with a passion to chant Makibaka, Huwag Matakot, and thank you. I'm going to now introduce Herb Delute for the MC of today's event.
Thank you, Melody. Be aware, like a lot of us are taking several hats. A lot of you see will just walk off the stage, not because we're being disrespectful, but because of the schedule. Again, magandang hapon sa inyo lahat. Buenos dias. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Herb Delute. It is an honor to be your master ceremony for Bold Steps, the 60th anniversary of the Delano Grape Strike. My father was a Delano Manong. My mother, like all our Delano families, was the heart and soul of our family. I worked in the fields with my mother, father, brothers, sisters, aunts, and uncles during the summers when I was in high school, college, and while teaching. At this point, I'd like to have you stand. I will now say our land acknowledgement. So please stand for the land acknowledgement and the national anthem. We acknowledge with gratitude that land upon which we gather today is the traditional lands of the Southern Valley Yolomni people, who have been displaced by unfavorable laws resulting in genocide, enslavement, and removal from their original territories throughout the San Joaquin Valley. Today, the Yolomni and the Wakichni bands of the Yukus people, as well as the Mano, Tabatulapa, and some Katamik people live on or near the Tule River Reservation in Tulare County. We recognize this region as the original land of the Yolomni people. We also recognize their long history in our place in that history. In so doing, we uphold the significance of these lands and waters of the Yolomni people who live and continue to live for the region, whose practice and spiritualities were and are tied to this region, and whose lives continue to enrich, develop in relationship to land, waters, and other inhabitants today. The Yolomni people has stewarded this land throughout the generations. We thank them for their strength and resilience in protecting this land and aspire to uphold our responsibilities according to their example and legacy. Next, we will be singing the national anthems, and please remain standing after the anthems have been sung. The United States national anthem will be sung by Daniella, Hightower, and the Philippines national anthem will be sung by Crismat, Mateo.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Bayang magiliw, perlas ng silanganan, alab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisiil, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bughaw, may dilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal, ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagniningning, ang bituin at araw niyang kailan pa may di magdidilim, lupa ng araw ng luwal, hatid pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo, aming ligaya ng pag may mang-aapi ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniella and Crismat. Thank you. At this moment, please stay standing. I would like to honor those who are not here with us with a moment of silence. Those who took the bold step to go out on strike, the Manongs that went out. But there are two individuals who were part of the first bold step celebration that I want to also honor. Dr. Dom Abalom, activist, history professor, and writer. And Alex Edilor, the founding president of FANHS Delano, voice of the Filipino community, and my classmate and friend. Let us bow our heads and provide a moment of silence. Please have a seat. We are honored to have these leaders in our community speak for us. Please be aware that they took the time out of their busy schedule to be with us. They apologize if they have to leave. At this point, we welcome Romeo Garcia, who is the inaugural National Director of FANHS. 2 decades of leadership centered on equity and justice. He is currently his doctorate in education and leadership. He now calls Seattle his home and works closely with the office and archives of the Delano, of the FANHS National Office with Dr. Lago Cordova, others known as Auntie Dorothy. And their role is to ensure the Filipino American history is documented, celebrated, and connected to broader movements for justice and liberation. Romeo.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, thank you folks in the back. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Romeo Garcia, and I'm deeply humbled to stand before you today as the inaugural National Director of the Filipino American National Historical Society. On behalf of FANHS and the co-founders, Dr. Dorothy Lago Cordova and the late Dr. Fred Cordova, it is an honor to join FANHS Delano. Thanks, Melody. I know Melody is running around. Chapters, our esteemed guest speakers, our Manongs and Manongs here today and those ancestrally present, student leaders, and all of you gathered here to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the historic Delano Grape Strike. As someone who grew up in the strawberry fields in agricultural Oxnard, California, I recognize the magnitude of contribution that farm workers provide, not just for the state, but for the global market and economy. On September 8, 1965, courageous farm workers made the bold decision to organize and walk off the fields with very little pay, no guarantees, and tremendous risk. They chose to stand together for dignity, for justice, and a better livelihood and conditions. That decision was not just a strike. It was a declaration of humanity, of us mattering and having dignity. It was a bold step that reshaped the labor movement and left a legacy that continues to inspire generations and resonates even today in our social justice movements. So for today, we remember that the struggle was about the people, ang aming kamay, the hands, the labor, the toil. About workers whose hands harvested the abundance for this nation, yet whose voices were too often silenced. It is about recognizing Filipino-American leadership is intrinsic. Thanks to Manong Larry at Leong, Philip Veracruz, Peter Velasco, and Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee. It is about building bridges of solidarity with Filipino and Mexicanos uniting together with the broader labor movement. And it was about envisioning a future where justice, equity, and community are not just dreams, but actual lived realities of working-class immigrants and families. To close, as we reflect on the past, we also carry forward the living legacy of Auntie Dorothy and the mission of FANHS to ensure that Filipino-American history, the lived experience of our Manongs and Manangs, and their courageous leadership are not only preserved, but also made visible, celebrated, and connected to ongoing movements for justice and liberation. Our presence here, Maraming salamat elders, the activists here, the scholars, the students, it reminds us that our history is alive. The courage of 1965 echoes in our work today, where we fight for workers' rights, when we demand for equity in education, and when we build coalitions across generations and identities. Their struggle becomes our responsibility, and their victories become our inspiration. So let us honor the Manongs and Manangs and all of those who boldly organize by continuing their fight in our own ways. Let us continue to take bold steps in our schools, our workplaces, in our communities, so that the sacrifices of those who came before us are never forgotten. And so that future generations inherit a world that's shaped by justice, dignity, and solidarity. Mabuhay Delano, maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. Thank you.
Thank you, Romeo. Just 1 second.
No, just like this.
It is my honor to introduce Rob Bonta, Attorney General of California. He's the 31st Attorney General of the state of California, the first person of Filipino descent to occupy the position, my role model, as well as his mother. His passion for justice and fairness was instilled by his parents. It is why he decided to become a lawyer. He led statewide fights for racial, economic, and environmental justice and worked to further the rights of immigrant families, renters, and working Californians. He sees seeking accountability from those who abuse their power and harm others. Pursuing corporate accountability, standing up for workers, punishing big polluters, and fighting racial injustice. He is the son of a proud native Filipino mother and a father who taught him the value of public service to his community. Of course, we have to honor his family. He's married to Mia Bonta and the proud parents of children Reina, Eliana, and Andres. Ladies and gentlemen, our Attorney General, Mr. Rob Bonta.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the warmth and the very kind reception. I'm honored to be here with all of you. Thank you to Herb for the very generous introduction, and thank you to the Delano FANHS chapter for bringing us together and lifting up this very important moment on the 60th anniversary of the Delano Grape Strike of 1965. So important to mark this occasion and remember what it meant and what it continues to mean. I also want to thank Romeo for the kind words, for his leadership at the national level. Of course, I have to acknowledge and pay my respect to the amazing, iconic, one and only inimitable Dolores Huerta. And you'll hear from Brother Mark Pulido in a second, the next assembly member from Orange County and LA County coming up soon, increasing representation in the state legislature. But I wanted to share a few remarks and reflections about the Delano Grape Strike of 1965, what it meant at the time, what it meant for me and my family, my journey, and what it, I think, continues to mean for us as a source of inspiration and aspiration for what we can, what we should do, how we can meet moments like the one that we're in. I think it is, has a lot of current meaning and resonance today, and specifically now. The Delano Grape Strike of 1965, the farm worker movement more broadly, those are uniquely California stories. They really reflect that phrase in California, about California, as California goes, so goes the nation. It represents the California exceptionalism that we're all so proud of. It shows courage and resilience. It shows fight and heart. It shows a desire to dream for something more, something better, something more fair, something more just, and to take the risk and to go first, to make it happen, to create change, to realize that you can't just sit back and wait for change to happen. You need to be the agent of change. You make the change. Don't look for the Calvary, looking to your left and right. You are the Calvary. If the change is going to happen, you're going to have to make it happen. And the courage of those who led the Delano Grape Strike of 1965 has never ceased to inspire me and amaze me. And it's also a story that is rooted in the power of unity, what we can accomplish when we fight together, when we lock arms, when we look after each other and take care of one another, and realize that we're all in this together, that there's no you versus me or us versus them. There's only us, and we need to fight for each other's futures together. And those lessons, I think, are particularly powerful today, and something that we should reflect on 60 years later. And I can't help but think of my own story as someone who was born in another country, born in the Philippines. And right after I was born, my parents looked at themselves and asked each other if they could raise me then and there in the Philippines in the early 1970s, and guarantee that the things that were non-negotiable for them, for their children, for our future, that they could deliver those, that those things would exist. And they don't seem like a lot to ask for, given that we live in this great country of the United States of America, but they wanted, for me, democracy, and they wanted freedom, and they wanted the rule of law, and they wanted due process, and they wanted human rights for me, and for us, and for our society that we grew up in. And they couldn't guarantee that. Those things were on the verge of being taken away. As a dictator rose to power, martial law was around the corner, and so my parents decided that they would bring me here to California. And they thought that here I could pursue and realize my own California dream, my own American dream, that we could have opportunity in a better life. And I can't thank them for that decision. A lot of decisions in my life have shaped me for who I am, but probably the most important decision ever made in my life was not made by me. It was made about me by my parents when I was 2 months old to bring me here. And they were absolutely right. As we left the Philippines, the dictator took over. Martial law was declared. Free and fair elections were over. Democracy gone. Those who opposed, who dared to speak up and speak truth to power and speak against the dictator and the human rights abuses were arrested, imprisoned, tortured, sometimes killed. My mom was an unapologetic, outspoken dissident. If you know Cynthia Bonta, and I was introduced as California Attorney General Bonta, I probably should have been introduced as Cynthia Bonta's son, who you guys all know. You know that she doesn't back down from anything. All 4'11" of her, not scared of anything, and will speak out about injustice whenever and wherever it exists. And so we came to California, and specifically LA. Echo Park was our first stop in California, and my parents started working for the United Farm Workers of America. They started collecting signatures outside of supermarkets as part of the lettuce boycott, and then they got recruited to go to La Paz. And so we went to La Paz. And in my early years, I was proudly a child of La Paz. We lived in a trailer, stone's throw away from the home of Cesar Chavez. My dad worked in the front office with Cesar. He set up healthcare clinics for the farm workers. My mom and our family met Dolores when we were there. My mom did work in the preschool, and they joined the many others, everyday people doing extraordinary things, seeing injustice and fighting against it, exhibiting and demonstrating the most potent power that there is, people power, and what can be accomplished when folks work together. And they fought for a fair contract. They fought for fair and safe working conditions. They fought for water breaks and bathroom breaks and shade breaks for the farm workers who are feeding our state and feeding our nation. And they were fighting an uphill battle against entrenched, established interests who seemed to always win. But they believed that they could prevail one day if they fought, that righteousness and justice was on their side, if they kept pushing ahead and didn't stop fighting. And that always stuck with me, that everyday people committed to a common goal can do anything and accomplish everything if they set their mind to it and their hearts to it. And there were so many people from different backgrounds, and it didn't matter if you were black or if you were white, if you were Filipino, if you were Latino, you were there because of the mission and you wanted to make a difference. And that has always stuck with me, that courage, that bravery, that unity, that belief in knowledge of inherent power to change that each of us has. People without fancy titles or lofty positions, but the most raw form of democracy and power that we have in our democracy, good old-fashioned people power, at work. And the Delano grape strike of 1965 is just such a critical example of that people power. And I've always imagined what it may have been like in that moment as Larry and others ushered into the Filipino Community Hall in Delano and got set to take a vote and determine what they were going to do next. And these are folks that were far away from their families, most of them. They were the lifeline and lifeblood for their families. They made money and sent it home. They went out on their own, alone, to be able to do that. And they also had an inherent sense of justice about what was right and what was wrong, and how they were being treated was wrong. And they stared down two potential pathways. They could take the easy path and continue to keep their head down, do their work, make their money, send it home to their family, or they could risk it all and take the other path, the righteous path, and fight for what was right, and maybe lose their jobs, maybe lose their livelihoods, maybe not be able to support their families, and maybe fail. Maybe have happen what had always happened up to then, where when the Filipinos went on strike, the Latinos were brought in to do the work. When the Latinos went on strike, the Filipinos were brought in to do the work. But they hoped that maybe this time could be different. Maybe they could unify this time, and together with solidarity and unity, fight back against the common threat of injustice and win. And they took the hard path, the path that required courage and resilience and to take a risk, not being sure of what the outcome would be. And that I've always thought about what it would have been like in that hall on that day, September 8th, 1965, and what that discussion must have been like. And I'm sure people were scared. And courage is not the absence of fear, it's the presence of fear and moving forward anyway to do what was right. And so that has always inspired me. And I like to think of the Filipino Community Hall for the Filipino American community, for California, for the farm worker movement as iconic a place and as deserving of a home in the pantheon of civil rights iconic places and locations as the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, where Bloody Sunday occurred and a stand was taken in the civil rights movement, or the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village in New York, where the LGBTQ community took a stand to fight for civil rights and to fight for social justice. That's what the community hall is to me, and to many. And it's inspired me in my work as someone who never believed I would ever be in this position, as the first Filipino-American Attorney General in the history of California, the first California state legislator in the history of California. I will confess to you that sometimes I secretly go on to the California DOJ website and I check to see if my name and my photo are really there. And I get very excited when I see it there, because it means I can do more important work to fight for justice. And as someone who grew up in Sacramento, I used to go with my parents to work some days, and I would look at the Capitol and I would wonder who was inside and how they got there. And I would see photos of the people that worked there, and I never once ever saw anyone who looked like me, and didn't think that that was a place for me. And I couldn't be more grateful and honored that I have this role. And so my goal and my role is to make it count, to use the authority and the power that I have to help the people that need it, to know that their fights are my fights, to know that their California Attorney General stands with them and fights for them, and that I will always use the full force of the law and the full authority of my office to fight against injustice and abuse of power and fight for everyday people. And so that has always been my goal. We've definitely fought for workers' rights. We've taken on greedy corporations who are involved in wage theft and underground economy, who are hurting workers and breaking the very important and some of the strongest in the nation laws that protect workers. We've brought criminal charges, we've brought civil cases, we've held folks accountable when they've broken the law. We will continue to do that. As a legislator in the Assembly before I became AG, this was a story that was so special to me, and I wanted as many other people to know this story as possible. And I remember I was a history major in college, and I remember opening up textbooks and hearing about the great stories of California and never seeing the story of Larry and the story of Philip, the story of the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee and the story of the Delano Grape Strike of 1965. And I thought that we were depriving so many Californians of a story of inspiration and power that they should know too. So as an Assembly member, I authored a bill called Assembly Bill 123 that required that the contributions of Filipino Americans to the California farm labor movement be taught in our schools, as students also learned about Dolores and Cesar and La Paz. Right. And the UFW, they should also know about Larry and Philip. And Dolores was one of my star witnesses testifying on behalf of that bill. Proud that we were able to do that together and accomplish that together. And the next year, not being completely satisfied yet, I authored AB 7, which created Larry Itliong Day in California on his birthday on October 25th. So we can remember him and celebrate him and be inspired by all that he stood for. And let me just end with this. We are in a challenging moment. I know some of you fear, anxious, stressed, fearful, some traumatized and terrorized by the presence of ICE and the National Guard, military, our own military, in our streets, in our cities, on American soil. And I want to, one, acknowledge those feelings, but also remind us all that we ought not feel hopeless, because we are not helpless. We have the most important and potent power that there is. We have people power, and the things that make democracy strong are engagement and participation and activism. What will kill democracy is not participating, neglect, and apathy. And so we have to stay engaged, we have to stay enraged about the abuse of power, the things that are happening now that are unacceptable, and commit to never accepting the unacceptable, never normalizing what is so abnormal. And sometimes I know there's a desire to turn away, turn off the news, turn it off for a second, I understand that sentiment. I will also say that when you turn it off or turn away, it doesn't go away. Those problems are still there, and they require people like us, you and me and us, we, the people whose government this is, a government of, for, and by the people, to stand up and push back and demand better. There's a lot of chapters left to be written in the story of California, in the story of America, and they're going to be written by you and me and us. Trump's bosses are not his billionaire buddies or greedy corporations. They are you and me and us, the people. We have a say. We determine what happens next. We'll have the last word, but we must fight for it. We must step up. So everyone needs to do more. If you're doing nothing, do something. If you're doing something, do more. Everyone can dig a little deeper, fight a little harder, ask a little bit more of themselves. I'm doing that. I know you will too. I'm speaking to the choir here. That's why you folks are all here. But I just want to end with this. There's three things that I believe are really important right now. I call them the 3 C's. I didn't make them up, but I thought they were incredibly powerful when one of my colleagues mentioned them. And they are courts, crowds, and courage. Courts, crowds, and courage, the 3 C's. And courts are places where people can bring lawsuits. Maybe a California Attorney General could bring a lawsuit against the Trump administration to hold them accountable when they break the law. We've brought 39 lawsuits in 32 weeks. We've sued the Trump administration each and every time he's violated the law and hurt California. Our goal is to never have to sue him, because if we didn't have to sue him, that would mean he's following the law and complying with the Constitution. But he has not. And so we have brought suits, and we have won when we sought restraining orders and preliminary injunctions. We've won when the court has issued an order over 90% of the time. And we will continue to hold this administration accountable and make sure that they comply with the law. So the courts are really important. Crowds as well. It's important to show up and speak out and join your fellow Californians and fellow Americans in hitting the streets and being in actions and mobilizations, whether it be No King's Day or hands off. We need to go hit the streets and remind people and speak up about what we want, what we demand, and what is not acceptable. So crowds are important. And then finally, courage. And it sounds obvious, but it's not to everyone. There have been so many people, institutions, who have acquiesced and capitulated in this moment when faced with threats, when the Trump administration has threatened to take away their rights and violate their rights. They have said, instead of fighting, they have said, what can I give you? You're violating my rights, I want to give you something. And I've never understood that. When your rights are violated, they must be vindicated. You have to go fight. And yes, it's risky. You're fighting the federal government. But if you have righteousness on your side, the law on your side, if you are the victim and they are the perpetrator, you must fight. And so if you need any reminder about what courage looks like, today's a great day to remember Larry and Philip and AWOC and the Delano Grape Strike of 1965, the National Farm Workers Association, who joined them with Dolores and Cesar 8 days later, and together created one of the most powerful, one of the most potent, one of the most transformative movements and organizations, the United Farm Workers of America, that this nation and the state have ever known. So sometimes the past is a source of inspiration for the present and for the future. And I think this year, celebrating the Delano Grape Strike of 1965, its 60th anniversary, what it has meant and what it continues to mean is particularly impactful. And I'm grateful that you're all here. Thank you for the fights that you will continue to fight. I'm honored to fight alongside you and for you. Happy anniversary.
Yeah. Thank you, Attorney General Rob Bonta. Thank you. Thank you. I know Attorney General's got a busy schedule, so be patient. She's got to get a chance. I'd like to introduce one of my role models.
Oh, my God.
Manong Dolores Huerta. When we did Larry the Musical, he said one of the influence women had a role in the strike. We need somebody in the musical that portrays what Dolores did, and that's the source of inspiration I want to make sure we have. She was a labor leader, a feminist activist, co-founded the National Farm Workers Association with fellow activists Cesar, Chavez, and Gilbert Padilla. Helped organize the Great Strike, managed the boycott campaigns in the East Coast, negotiating with the companies to end the strike. And you know, I'm not sure this is true, but every time I hear the word "si puede," I think of Dolores. No, seriously. Yes, you can. Si puede. I don't know, for some reason, Dolores, I think that's you every time I hear it. She founded Dolores Huerta Foundation, a civic advocacy organization based in Bakersfield, California. She's won numerous awards, and I'd like to highlight the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2012. Yes. Governor Jerry Brown signed a bill proclaiming April 10th as Dolores Day in California, and a similar bill in Oregon in 2019. Ladies and gentlemen, Manong Dolores Huerta.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to commemorate the beginning of the great Delano Grape Strike right here in Delano, California. And I want to thank all of you that are here, that came here to celebrate with us today. And I'm sure, I know we're getting up in years, but I'm sure that there's probably people here that either were in the strike or that their parents were in the strike, because that strike lasted 5 years. 5 years. And during that time of the strike, people were not getting any money. We were living off of donations of food and clothes that people from Los Angeles brought us, people from San Francisco bought it, but from everywhere. And so there was a big, big sacrifice. People lost their homes, they lost their cars, you know, and the children, you know, the children didn't have, once a year they would bring us Christmas presents from Los Angeles, right, for the kids. But it was beautiful because everybody worked together. And it ended so much separation that because the employers always like to keep the people separate. They had the Filipino crew, and they had the black crew, and they had the Puerto Rican crew, and they had the white crew. But then what happened when we signed those contracts, we got everybody to work together. And in the strike, everybody worked together. You know, and you know, one of the great things about Larry E. Long, he was fearless. He was fearless. And my claim to fame is that I recruited Larry E. Long, okay? I recruited Larry E. Long. We both were from Stockton, California, and I belonged to this organization that preceded the union. It was called the Community Service Organization, and we formed a farm labor group in that organization. And so I organized a group of farm workers and turned them over to another union, and then it fell apart. So then I organized another group, and we called it Agricultural Workers Association, AWOC. And I had an Okie organizer, I had a black organizer, I had a Latino organizer, but what was missing? A Filipino organizer. So I went to all my friends that I knew in Stockton, and they all said, there's one man who is a leader. His name is Larry E. Long. So I had to find Larry E. Long, and I finally found him. He was living in a place called Conway Homes in Stockton. I went to Larry's house, and I had a meeting at his house with him and his wife, and I told him what we were doing. And so he joined the Community Service Organization, CSO, and together we formed this large group of farm workers. So then somebody from the AFL-CIO came out to Stockton, and they to see how many people we had organized. And they saw that we had all of these farm workers, so then they hired an organizer from the South and started this organization called Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, AWOC. So since I was hired by them, then I got to hire the organizers, and I hired Larry Itliong to be one of the organizers. And everything was going pretty good for a while. We had all these meetings. We'd have a meeting every single month. But then one day they told me, well, we don't want to have any more meetings. I said, what? No, we don't want to have any more meetings. And then one day I walked in the office, and there were a lot of labor contractors. And I want to make an exception here because some labor contractors are really good, some of them were not so good, okay? Because some of them would rip off the workers, take money from their checks that were not authorized to do that. So I have to say this, that the Filipino crew leaders were very good because they took care of the workers, okay? So the Filipino labor contractors were very, very different from the Latinos and the other contractors. But when I saw that, then I decided to leave. So I left, okay? I left, and then that is when Cesar and I said, we've got to start a union. And so we started a whole separate union. So from 1962 to 1965, here in Delano. I moved to Delano, Cesar moved to Delano, because he was originally from Delano, Cesar was. So we started having meetings in people's homes. We call them house meetings. And we did that for 3 years. And we were not going to go on strike until 1968, because we wanted to organize the whole valley. We wanted, everywhere from Delano, California, all the way up to Fresno and Merced and Madera. So we had meetings in all these places. And we had a large group of workers that we had organized. But then Larry came to town, and Larry said that he wanted to do a strike, okay? They had just had a strike in Coachella. I think it lasted a couple of weeks. And so Larry invited me to come to the strike meeting. This is why I say Larry was fearless. A lot of the workers in Larry's crew didn't want to go on strike. They said, look, we just came from Coachella. Our pockets are empty. I remember one brother stood up in the meeting and he pulled out the pockets out of his pants. He said, our pockets are empty. We don't want to go on strike. But Larry said, no, we've got to do it now, because we have some momentum from Coachella. And so they took the strike vote and they went on strike. And so then we had to have a meeting with our executive board whether we were going to support the strike or not. So we thought, well, we'll wait and see what happens. What happened? Many of the brothers of the workers, they lived in labor camps, and the growers shut off the lights, shut off the gas, shut off the water, so they could not even cook. And in addition to that, they were beating some of the workers up, physically assaulting them. And so we said, no, we can't wait. So we called a meeting of our membership, and we had a big meeting there by the Guadalupe Church or the Guadalupe Hall, and all of the people said, we took a vote, and everybody said, we've got to support the Filipino workers, and we're going to go on strike. And we did, okay? Viva la huelga! Mabuhay! And that strike lasted for 5 years, okay? And from that day that strike started, people had picket lines every single day for 5 years. Every single day for 5 years. And then we got together, and then because the Filipinos are so much smarter than we are, they set up a strike kitchen, okay? And so we didn't have to worry about, the women cooking for our kids. We could go to Filipino Hall in the morning, and we could get our breakfast there for the children, and then we could go there at lunchtime. We could go there for dinner. So anyway, everything went on. It worked very, very well. And then, of course, we had to send people out on the boycott. And some of the brothers went out on the boycott too. Julian Baladoy, Brother George, 82 years old, he went to New York City on the boycott. 82 years old, he went on the boycott. And so, the boycott lasted 5 years, and we eventually won. But the beautiful thing about it, we people worked together. And we merged the crews. No more separation. And you know what came out of the merging of the crews? A lot of marriages. And I don't know how that happened. There's one couple here in Delano. The woman was from Mexico. She could not speak English. the brother, her future husband, couldn't speak Spanish. I don't know how it happened. Chemistry, but they got married. They got married. So anyway, it was just, showing the world that people can work together. And it was not just the Filipinos and the Mexicans, it was the Puerto Ricans, it was some of the white people who worked in some of the packing sheds, It was everybody that worked together, and we made it happen. And that really shows the power of collective action. But again, I have to just say to everybody, because Larry was a fearless leader, okay? Thank you so much.
Good.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, Manong Dolores Huerta. Thank you so much. You inspire me. I'd like to introduce Roberto El Capitan Bustos, was a friend of Cesar Chavez and a leader of the pilgrimage from Delano to Sacramento. Okay, think about it. You walk from Delano to Sacramento, okay? Cesar Chavez led the pilgrimage from Delano to Sacramento to build awareness for the UFW movement. We went from 77 to 100, 200, 300, 400. After 25 days and 400 miles, the marchers movement finally made it to Sacramento, hoping the growers would come to the bargaining table with the farm workers to unionize. And Roberto said, I was given the key to the city, Sacramento, on behalf of the rest of the marchers. July 1970, the growers finally signed for the unionization of farm workers. Ladies and gentlemen, Roberto.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Thank you. 60 years, wow. 60 years, and I was there every day. Like Dolores mentioned, from 5 in the morning. We were out there every day for 5 years. And we made history. We made history. We're in the history books. People are reading about us. And a lot of people still don't believe, hey, that we were out there. And we were. 60 years, God, that's a long time. Time flies, huh? It was an honor for me, guys. It was an honor for me to be named Captain, El Capitan, of the historic first-time march, farm worker march from Delano to Sacramento in 1966. It was the first time. When they asked me to be El Capitan, I said, what? No, wait a minute. Is there somebody else that can do it? They go, no, we want you. We want you to do it. So, wow, okay, all right, I'll take the challenge. Okay, let's go, let's do it. But I need some help. I need some help. I got to get people to help me. So I asked around all the strikers there to help me, to be my assistants. I asked Willie Barrientos, I asked Joseph Reeves, Sebastian, Philip Veracruz, and then Neno Vasquez, and Ernie del Armante. I asked all of these people to help me. The only ones that said, okay, we can do it, we'll do it, is Manuel Vasquez and Ernie del Armante. Wow. So I asked the other workers, the other strikers, to get more help. I needed some help. So we finally got 8 assistants to help us. And again, guys, it was something new for all of us. And I didn't know back then, when we went on strike, I didn't know that we took on the most powerful, richest industry in the nation, the Delano table grape growers. They had the money, they had the power, they had the police on their side. And what did we have? We had a dedication, our sincere, and our picket sign. That's the only thing we had. But we did it. But we did it. When we talk about the march to Sacramento, it's wow, it's a long ways. It's a long ways. We know we crossed the freeway 3 times.
Wow.
We jumped over 3 times to get to where we're supposed to be getting. 53 towns we hit. 53 towns. And half of those towns, we spend the night. We had a rally. We're asking people, why we were going, why we were marching, what was going to happen. we needed their help also, to give us food, give us water, things like that. Yeah, and they came through. They helped us. So when we started, it was only 77 of us. 77 of us that took the challenge. But every day, it grew, it grew, it grew. People were joining, and we had to sign them up, and let what company you work for. So we can let the company, let them know, hey, your people are on strike. They're going to Sacramento. They're going to go see the governor. We're going to protest to the governor. So we did a lot of work during this 25 days that we marched, 25 days. 15, 20 miles a day, 400 miles total when you look at it. 53 towns that we went through, a lot of people. 200, 300, 400, even the last stretch, West Sacramento, 2,000 people were marching. 2,000 people were marching. And when we got there, we got into Sacramento on April 10th, 1966, Easter Sunday. Over 10,000 people were waiting for us. They were waiting for us. Man, we opened the eyes of a lot of people, especially about the farm workers, the issue about farm workers. So guys, the saying, si se puede, and we added another word to it, si se pudo. We did it, we did it, we did it. They mentioned the key to the city that was given to me, the key to the city on behalf of the marchers. And that key is in La Paz. I donated it. I gave it to them. I said, here, I want you to put this key. I want people to see it. So they have it. It's in La Paz. So you guys go down there, you're going to see it. Check it out. It has my name on it, but check it out.
Yeah, and you
But it's everybody's.
talk about how they tried to stop the march.
Oh yeah, I got a picture here.
Yeah.
I got a picture here that I brought with me that shows the policemen, the department stopping us at the beginning. They stopped and they said, "You don't have a permit for this parade." Parade? This is a pilgrimage. This is a march. Right. This is not a parade. You see any floats behind us? 2 hours, 2.5 hours, they stopped us.
They tried to stop the march.
And I believe Bobby Kennedy.
Robert Kennedy, yes.
Bobby Kennedy was in town.
Senator Kennedy, yeah.
And that's the one that I'm sure that he's the one that called and says, you let my people go, or else you're going to see a civil suit from the farm workers. But they stopped us. They see a sign right there in the picture I brought. Look at all the people there, all the police stopping us. 2.5 hours. But yeah, after it, we went. Cesar told them, if we cannot march on the streets, then we're going to march on the sidewalk. Well, we did it. We went. 53 towns that we went through, and we did it. That's my story, guys. That's my story. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Roberto. Thank you for leading the march. It's symbolic how it starts small and grows, and that's what we want. We want to continue to grow it. At this point, I'd like to introduce the Honorable Mark Pulido. He has served 20 years in the public office as council member, former mayor of Cerritos, and the ABC Unified School Board president of Southeast Los Angeles. He is the son and grandson of immigrants from the Philippines, but he's also the proud adopted son of the United Farm Workers Movement, mentored by Philip Veracruz, P. Velasco, and Mariano Bob Armington. He tried to keep the legacy alive, our beloved Manong and Manongs. His sister, Marissa Pulido, his wife, Gloria, created pilgrimage to Delano 40 Acres for 20 plus years. And Roger out there, that's why he was here. Roger came. So at this point, I'd like to introduce my brother, Mark Pulido.
Good afternoon, sisters and brothers. On behalf of the organizing committee, they asked me to start out by recognizing the following special guests who have joined us today. So if you bear with me, let's give it up for the Honorable Delano Mayor Liz Morris. and Councilmember Brian Osorio. Delano Joint Union High School District Trustee Arnold Morrison. Trustee Valerie Gorospe, and I understand the superintendent of the district is also here, Kenneth Moore, who allowed us use of this great facility, Robert F. Kennedy High School. Delano Union School District Trustee Suzanne Villaruz. Palomar Community College District Trustee Dr. Judy Pataxil. I see you. Daughter of Larry Itliong, Patty Serta Itliong. Daughter of Al Rojas, Desiree Rojas. Pinoy Educational Partnerships founder, Dr. Allison Tintianco Cubales. I'm not sure if she's here, but I have Filipino American Educators of California President, Dr. Robin Rodriguez. City of Ventura Council Member Ryan Schumacher. City of South San Francisco, Buena Flor Nicolas, Council Member. Kern County Supervisor Leticia Perez. The Assembly Member Dr. Jasmeet Baines, who's also, I understand, running for Congress. Emilio Huerta, son of Dolores Huerta. Good to see you, brother. Council member from the city of Bakersfield, Andre Gonzalez, running for Assembly too. And my brother in the back there, Santa Ana Council member Phil Becerra, grandson of a Delano Manongs. And any other distinguished officials I may have inadvertently missed, thank you for joining us today. Once again, good afternoon, my beautiful sisters and brothers. I'm very humbled and honored to share the stage with our brother, but I know that he had to move on. The Honorable California Attorney General Rob Bonta. I just want to say, in my view, the hardest working California Attorney General in California history. The great living legend, you just heard her today, Dolores Huerta of the Dolores Huerta Foundation. Brother Robert Bustos from the Cesar Chavez Foundation. Herb Delute, our great Emcee. And the new first ever National Director of FANHS, Romeo Garcia. And she kicked us off today, the FANHS Delano Chapter President, Melody Sabaran Ybarra. I also want to take the personal privilege to give a shout out to my compadre, Johnny Itliong and the Itliong family, and those members of the Chavez family who are here and the Huerta family who are here. And though she may not be in the room, the UFW President, Teresa Romero, I just want to give a shout out to the leadership and the rank and file members of the United Farm Workers of America. Sisters and brothers, as a proud son and grandson of immigrants from the Philippines and a proud adopted son of the farm worker movement, I'm humbled and honored to join together with my wife Gloria and my sister Marisa of the Agbayani Village Pilgrimage Organizing Committee, and each and every one of you here today to mark the historic milestone event in American history. Our collective presence today honors the spirit of unity sparked 60 years ago this week on September 8th, 1965, that marks the start of the Great Delano Grape Strike. It also signifies our common cause and shared destiny to push for progress and possibilities each and every day for the benefit of all of our communities, to survive and endure for generations to come. How fitting and righteous that we celebrate our shared history here at Robert F. Kennedy High School in the great city of Delano, California, a center for the fight for justice and human dignity. And that we do so 143 years after the first Labor Day was celebrated in the United States in 1882 as a holiday to honor America's workers. In addition to the power of people and the power of purpose, I strongly believe in the power of place. I consider Delano in many ways a sacred place for our peoples, our communities here in America, for what took place here and was achieved here, what was forged in struggle, in solidarity with one another, and tested over tumultuous times, is destined to grow, evolve, and endure for generations to come. That fight in the fields that we speak of continues to burn in the hearts of the multitude 6 decades later. Our presence here today is evidence of that fact. The historical significance of this legacy venue is not lost on me. That it was 59 years ago at an auditorium like this, just a short 1.8 miles east of here at Delano High School, that then United States Senator Robert F. Kennedy made his first visit to Delano in March 1966 to attend the United States Senate Subcommittee on Migratory Labor, the hearing to investigate what was going on with the Delano grape strike. At that hearing, Senator Kennedy confronted local authorities and publicly called out their unjust actions and expressed his support for the striking farm workers. Senator Kennedy questioned Kern County Sheriff Leroy Galligan during the hearing. The sheriff admitted that he had arrested peaceful strikers because he believed that they were, quote, ready to violate the law, not that they had actually committed any crimes. When Kennedy then sarcastically suggested that the sheriff and the district attorney read the United States Constitution, he generated national media attention that put a spotlight on the plight of the farm workers, on the grape strike and the boycott. The senator's support played a pivotal role in the strike's ultimate success. Following that state Senate hearing, Senator Kennedy visited Filipino Hall, just a short 1.3 miles east of here, where the strike headquarters was located. Brother John Armington recalled once to me that his mother, Velma Armington, headed up the strike kitchen at the Filipino Hall, and she had prepared adobo for the senator to enjoy. He also shared that his father, Manong Mariano Bob Armington, he had made the formal motion for the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, AFL-CIO, to strike the Delano growers during the historic strike vote meeting the night before on September 7, 1965. At the time of his visit to Filipino Hall, Senator Robert F. Kennedy was only 40 years young and tragically would be taken from us, assassinated only 2 short years later. Sisters and brothers, I'm humbled and grateful to celebrate with you today this 60th anniversary of the great Delano grape strike. On behalf of our generation of adopted sons and daughters of the Delano Manongs, those original strikers, AWOC Strong and UFW United, though they have all since passed on, it's their collective spirit that lives on in our hearts. My personal connection to the Manong generation includes my Lolo Delfin Angeles, who came through San Francisco in 1918. My great-grandfather Alejo Lagmay and his nephew, my Lolo Esteban Lagmay, who arrived through Seattle in 1929. As a little kid, I heard these family stories, but it wasn't until later in college that they began to resonate in my life when I began making trips here to Delano. Each year I was in college, and I sat at the feet of the last of the living Manongs to listen to their stories. My wife Gloria, Sister Marisa, and I are proud to represent the Agbayani Village Pilgrimage Organizing Committee, and for the past 38 years we have been making countless trips from Los Angeles to Delano to bring hundreds of college and high school students to learn about the important contributions of the Filipino American community to American history. We consider Delano the mecca of struggle and activism for our community here in the United States. We feel that places like Agtang Village, the Filipino Community Hall, and now Larry Itliong Unity Park, and even here, Robert F. Kennedy High School, that these are sacred grounds for our people in this country. These are not just historical sites, they are gathering places where generations come together to affirm our shared humanity and learn from each other and strive for a better tomorrow for us all. I get emotional because of the profound impact the Manongs had on me as a teenager. When I first started visiting Delano and Agtang Village in 1987, I was only 18 years old. There were only about 20 Manongs still alive back then at the village. We spent a lot of time together with the Manongs, Philip Vera Cruz, Bob Armington, Pete Velasco, Fred Abad, and many others. We listened to their stories, talked late into the night, performed Filipino folk dances for them, ate adobo and pancit with them, played cards with them. Little did we realize that we were learning from them and would carry their life lessons forward to pass on to our future children. In time, we visited them in the hospital and attended their memorial services to mourn them, pay respects, and celebrate their lives. Due in part to racist anti-miscegenation laws, most of them grew old without having the children of their own. Consequently, we became their chosen family, adopted sons and daughters of the Manong generation. College students from UCLA, UC Berkeley, Cal State Long Beach, San Diego State, San Francisco State, USC, and so many others, some of whom are here today. And I see you. And I know what brought you back here today is those deep feelings of love for our beloved Manongs. When the last of the Manongs passed in the late 1990s, sadly, those visits stopped until we realized what was keeping their stories and legacy alive was us, was the community. And so by the early 2000s, we realized that that fire that was set ablaze by the Manongs in our hearts was still burning strong, even as we grew older and started our own families. So we started visiting Delano once again with a new generation of high school and college students and connected with a new generation of, I'm going to call them modern day Manongs, like Roger Gadiano, Max Becerra, John Armington, and though he's not with us anymore today, he's with us in spirit, Manong Alex Edilor. We intentionally called our road trips pilgrimages because they became very powerful, spiritual, life-transforming journeys for us. And that is what brings us back time and time again. Sisters and brothers, I wanted to conclude my remarks by acknowledging the actions of another great civil rights advocate and fighter for justice, much like Robert F. Kennedy. But she's our generation, and she's our recent acting United States Secretary of Labor, Julie Su, my friend for 4 decades, since the 7th grade, my chosen family, my sister. Last year on November 20th, 2024 in Washington, D.C., during the Hall of Honor induction ceremony, Labor Secretary Julie Su declared, quote, "I'm honored to induct Larry Dulay Itliong, Philip Vera Cruz, and Peter Guinness Velasco into the Department of Labor's Hall of Honor, where they take their rightful place among the giants in the labor movement." Leaders who have helped shape the fabric of American history. Secretary Su spoke further to the historical impact that
their collective efforts, and those unsung 1,500 strong original strikers, their collective efforts made on the American labor movement. She said, the demand for a union rippled across America and around the world and affirmed a basic truth that when workers are strong, our economy is better. And when workers join together, it's not a threat to democracy. It is its lifeblood. Today, while immigrants are being attacked and scapegoated for political gain, we proudly place immigrants who represent the best of what our country can be in the Hall of Honor, so that they can take their rightful place in American history. We do so not merely to memorialize, but to remind ourselves of what remains unfinished. And so with that, sisters and brothers, on this 60th anniversary, this is where we come in to continue the unfinished work. That we not just simply commemorate and celebrate, but that we remain vigilant, steadfast, and engaged in the struggle to improve the lives of working people, working families, and in doing so, make a more perfect, truly working nation that can live and thrive together. Let us not leave here as a people satisfied or content. Let this be the next clarion call to action, that we recommit ourselves to the pursuit of social and economic justice, to continue building community and movements for progress and change. There is still so much history to be written, so much history to be made in the fields and in the cities of California, and in workplaces, neighborhoods, and communities across the country each and every day. Happy 60th Delano Grape Strike. Let's keep it going. Makibaka, huwag matakot, sisi puede. Thank you and God bless. My beautiful sisters and brothers.
Thank you. Okay, it's only appropriate. Do we have any original AWOC members out here? Are there any AWOC members? I need to acknowledge if you're here. Is anybody?
Lorraine, right there, Lorraine Agtang.
Lorraine, Alex Fabros. At that point, we thank our speakers and we start making the transition to our panel. Thank you to our speakers and...
Brother Herb, can I...
Yeah.
Sisters and brothers, I come from a small town in southeast LA County, the City of Cerritos, and on behalf of the mayor and my colleagues, I'd like to present this to the host committee, the organizing committee. If I can, I'd like to present it to Herb and the rest of the folks.
I know we have some people that were in the strike and the children of the workers that were on strike. And I see some of our brothers and sisters here who came this young man came all the way from New York City. He was just one of our boycott people. He ended up working on the village. Do you want to stand up? Come on, Lucy, come on, stand up, stand up. Other people whose families were on the strike, stand up. Yeah, other people whose families were on the strike, strikers, huelguistas, pónganse de pie, okay? Because these are the people that sacrificed. Let's give them an applause, please. Thank you, thank you.
Join in. Ready? Join in. Good. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's start transition.
We have Alex, Lorraine, and Roger come up to the stage, please.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Please, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
I think this part, we really want to dedicate this part for their youth.
Another word. And
What we heard were stories.
you better.
Stories about who we are.
Tell me.
Each has found a way to tell and preserve the story of the bold step that the Filipino farm workers took part in a Great Strike in 1965. Notice the different ways to tell our story so they will not be forgotten. At this point, we talk about the life in Delano, before the strike, during the strike, and after the strike. Alex Fabros, Lorraine Agtang, Roger Gadiano. I will share a brief bio of each of our speakers. Each will speak for 15 minutes, and we have 15 minutes or whatever time is left over a Q&A. With a PhD in U.S. labor history from UC Santa Barbara, Alex Fabros has been an adjunct faculty for the Asian American Studies at San Francisco State University. A migrant worker, farm worker, primary in the Salinas Valley. Public speaking and written poetry and several articles to prevent the history of Manongs from folding into the past, fading into the Alex Fabros. In the middle, Lorraine Agtang, the few surviving 1965 Filipino grape strikers. Only with 13 when the walkouts began. Proudly returned to work under the UF contract when the strike was won in 1970. Walked out again in 1973 to the second grape strike. First manager of the Palo Agbiano Retirement Village for the Manongs, which a lot of you visited. The UFW organized in the first union elections and continues telling this movement story, and especially the Filipino contributions. My buddy, Roger Gadiano. After growing up in Delano, Roger, field worker, Ranger in Vietnam, a member of UFW, we were founders of the Philippine Weekend, okay, 41 years ago. The Gadiano family owned the HB markets, which served the local camps, which made him very familiar with the details of the life in the camps. He conducted tours of 40 acres, Agbiano Village, and the Filipino Community Hall. I will have each of the speakers speak for like 15 minutes, then we'll have a time for Q&A, time permitting. At this point, I'd like to introduce Alex Fabros.
Thank goodness we can sit down instead of standing. I dropped out of college in 1964. And I was exiled to my Lolo's labor crew of about 40 Filipinos. And we started off in the Imperial Valley, cutting les. Then we moved up to Gonzales, where I was able to participate in my first labor strike, lasted a little over a weekend. And I went surfing while the guys were on the line with their signs. From there, we went down to a place called Coachella. It's not where it wasn't any festivals at the time, just a bunch of Filipinos working. And then sometime, I can't remember the date now, but a man came into the fields, introduced himself to my lolo and said, "I'm here from AWOC. We're trying to organize you Filipinos." And my lolo said, "How much to join?" He said, "It's only $1 today." We had 40 guys in the crew. My grandfather pulled out two $20 bills, gave it to him, and gave him another 20 to buy lunch. So that's how I joined AWOC. I really don't know if our dues were ever paid or if the guy just walked off with the money, but I was a member of the union. A few days later, we were at Freeman's Ranch, camp number 2, and a man came in and talked to us very briefly about the union. And we said, "Bring the speakers in tomorrow, we'll welcome them." Because those guys were not allowed to walk onto those farms without an invitation from one of the workers. We met him at the gate. He came in and he spoke to us for about an hour, hour and a half. Told us what the union was all about and why it was important to strike. We said, "Sure, we'll go on strike. Plus I can go and visit my cousin up in Santa Monica and date one of his friends." So we went on strike. It lasted me about a week, I believe. And my lolo said, "This isn't yours," because I just received my draft notice. Said, "Take your time off." So when I came back, the strike was settled. We went back to work. Around August, we went up to a place called Delano. And it's kind of like the place you stop by besides Bakersfield before you go to Hatchy Pass. We worked for about a week, 2 weeks, and then somebody said, "We might be going on strike." Now, we were at a camp just south of here, I think it's called Zadanovich, so that starts with the letter Z. We used to call it the Zorro camp. And they came down, they talked to us about going on strike. And I think it was Philip Veracruz that came down and talked to us. I wasn't paying attention back then because I really wasn't interested. I had just received my draft notice, and I'd be going up to Oakland on the 19th of September. So we went to the Filipino hall here, and they had a talk. Most of us, the contractors, were speaking for us. The field crews were speaking for us. And someone said, "Do we go on strike or not go on strike?" And I think each of the crew leaders and many of the others stood up and gave their points of view. But in the end, we all said, "We're going to strike." And then we said, "You know, they got a lot of Mexicans here. They're going to break our union." And we were still out there trying to strike, and there was Mexicans going to the fields where we were picketing at. And I was down in Coachella when we got beat up by the white growers and their kids and their friends. You don't realize it, but Coachella was actually on the verge of becoming a very violent place for Filipinos versus whites. We had many of our Manongs were being beaten up when they went to town to go shopping. And I was 19 years old. When I started off as a really skinny kid, but after about 7 months working in the fields, lifting boxes of lettuce, asparagus, and grapes, I was pretty strong. And the Manongs taught me Kali, and even taught me a couple ways to fight. And us young kids went out in town, we started looking for people to beat up on. So at the end of the strike very fast in Coachella because of the potential violence that would erupt if both sides lost control. Up here in Delano, they kept us pretty much under control, but there were times when we would go downtown and the white kids would come by and call us names. And I guess around the 15th or 16th, can't remember the date now, but we had a meeting at the at the Union Hall. We call it then the Filipino Hall. And Larry said, I'm going to go talk to the Mexicans because we can't have them coming in to break our strike. Because we had several Mexican crews that had crossed our picket line and went to the fields that we were boycotting south of Delano at the Zadanovich camp. And I went up there with a bunch of the other kids. We were just tossing pinwheels. And they were in there for a while. I guess it was Mexican Independence Day. And someone started saying, huelga. And I said, what the hell is that? And he said, it's a strike. I said, well, we pronounce it differently. And so that's the day the Mexicans joined us. I only stayed around for another 3 or 4 days, and then I got on a bus to go up to Oakland to the induction center. And my cousin was there, plus a high school friend was there. So instead of being inducted into the Army, I went to the Marine Corps. I went first for 2 years, and when I was in Vietnam, my gunny said, I got a deal for you. And it was roughly about $10,000 US, probably worth about $100,000 in today's dollars. So I re-enlisted in the Marine Corps for 6 more years, went to the spy school in Baltimore, went to Monterey, learned how to speak Chinese Mandarin, and learned how to speak Vietnamese. I returned to Vietnam a second time to a very special combat unit called the Combined Action Program. As a matter of fact, in Japan in 1970, and I was in a hospital for about a month, and then they kept me in Japan where I studied Japanese, so all of a sudden I started learning languages. But one of the things I learned when I was working with the Filipino men, they tried to teach me Ilocano Tagalog. The way they did it was through song. But I'd like to read something here. I was in Baltimore in 1967 when the boycott headed east. And there's a Safeway located in Edmondson Avenue in West Baltimore. I didn't recognize him right away. The rain was slanting sideways, soaking the sidewalk outside the Safeway on Edmondson Avenue. I just pulled over watching a dozen picketers hold signs with red paint bleeding through this cardboard. The signs read, no grapes, 140 now, don't buy pain. And then one of the picketers turned. He was stocky, shoulders sloped, just the same. Head wrapped in a wet blue bandana. His boots were the same kind we wore in the fields, old, scarred, lived in. He lifted his sign to the sky as the car passed by, UFW Delano to Baltimore. And when he looked toward me, I knew, Benito Ben Solidaris, Ben, my brother in the picket line. The man who carried a busted Union sign on his back like a shield. The man who had shouted Tanungan Tayo as the bunkhouse burned behind us in Delano. I left him in September 1965 and rode a bus to Oakland in my sulfur-dusted work clothes, signed to Marines with no toothbrush, no duffel bag. I thought I left that behind, but here in Baltimore, been in Baltimore, 2,000 miles from the fields, same cause, same fire. I stepped out of the car into the rain. He turned to me and says, what the F are you doing here? And I said, you came all the way to all the way to Baltimore, and he said, DC first. Do you need bodies on the East Coast? I told Larry I'd go. We're boycotting supermarkets now. Secondary strike, the growers hate it. I need to stop here. The reason we could do secondary boycotts, because in the American labor law, it is illegal to do secondary boycotts but farm workers were not covered under the rights of union workers. We had no rights whatsoever. And that's the reason that the Filipinos and the UFW, AWOC were able to do secondary boycotts, something that people don't know about or forget about. So he looked at me and asked me if I wanted to join the picket line. He says, you know, I'm a sergeant in the Marine Corps. That'd be illegal as hell. He says, you know, in the rain, no one's going to recognize you. So I grabbed the sign for about an hour. I walked with him. Then I had to continue on back to my base at Fort Holabird. Yeah. So anyway, that's all I have to say. If you go to my Facebook page, there's a poem that I wrote, and it's about the strike. Go ahead and read it, okay?
Hashid. We're going to have Hashid read the poetry. You can go, there's a mic right there. This is a poetry written by Alex Fabros. And Hashid, one of our FANHS members, will now read it for you.
60 Harvest Gone, Delano, 1965 to 2025, by Alex S. Fabros, Jr. The vines were heavy, the sun unkind, but the growers' hands were harder still. Filipino Manongs, weary, lined, refused to bend to another will. It was September, 60 years passed, when Larry Idleong raised his call. From camp to camp, the word spread fast. Leave the grapes, we rise or we fall. They struck for dignity, not just pay, for food, for housing, for a voice. Against the growers' power play, the workers stood with one fierce choice. Then came the marchers, Mexican kin, Cesar, Chavez, Dolores, Huerta, near, two peoples once kept far within. Now walk together, shedding fear, through boycott lines in distant towns, through speeches whispered, shouted, sung. They faced the threats, the fists, the frowns, and proved their power when joined as one. Today, the vines still twist and grow, but echoes linger in the field. The hands that dared 60 years ago broke the silence, refused to yield. So lift a glass, remember their fight. The Manongs Mujeres who stood tall for justice born in Delano's night belongs not to one, but to us all.
Poetry by Alex Fabros, read by Hashid. Thank you. At this point, I'd like to introduce Lorraine Agtang.
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. I'm so happy to be here. I watch these young people walk in and sit down. How old are you guys? You know, when the strike began in 1965, I was only 13 years old. Back you mentioned that about the National Labor Relations Board had laws that covered all workers, but farm workers were excluded. You know, so it didn't matter how old you were. If you were a kid, you could work in the fields. You didn't have to go to school. You could work in the fields. So I see you come in. I says, man, I was a child of the movement. Now I'm a Manong of the movement. So and the lasting movement that it has made in my life. But when I'm thinking pre-strike days, what Delano was like, you know, they have the tracks, right? The tracks are back here. You had all the Anglos that lived on the east side of town. Did you know that? And on the west side of town is where all the Mexicans and the Filipinos lived. That's where Roger lived. I lived in a labor camp that was like a mile and a half outside of town on Cecil Avenue. And it was a camp for families. There were like 3 families that lived there. And a quarter mile away was a male camp, and that's the camp that my uncle lived in, so we spent a lot of times at the camp. because they could eat some good food, and there was always something going on there that we were a part of. So, but Delano was very segregated, and you don't see the whites mixed with the people of color. Though I know my brothers tried to date some of those white girls and got in big trouble for doing it. That doesn't happen anymore, but it did happen back then. And, and they had anti-miscegenation laws that kept Filipinos from being able to marry white women. And many of them had white girlfriends. So that's why we had so many Manongs that were single men, because they couldn't get married in this land of ours. So everybody kind of kept to themselves. The communities didn't really mix that much. My father is Filipino and my mother was a Mexican, so, and back then too, you're not enough to be a Filipino and you're not enough to be a Mexican. You're kind of like an in-between. We always said we're the best of both sides.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we all lived in West Delano.
Yeah.
Mexipina power.
Right. Amen, brother. So the strike made a big change in the environment in Delano. The Filipinos started the strike, but they experienced that they couldn't win the strike alone because there were so many Hispanic and Puerto Rican and other workers that were going to be willing to break the strike. So that is when they hooked up with Cesar, Dolores, and the farm workers, AWOC and UFA. And that too is a long-term legacy. So let's go to during the strike. What was that like? I was 13 when the strike began. I remember when they called us out of the field. We were working for Ybarra Farms, who happens to be like one of the biggest growers that was against a union. So they said, "Come on out, brothers and sisters, join us." And I was like a kid, and my brothers and my sisters and my father and my mother. And they said, "Come on, we're leaving." So we're leaving. We're leaving work. It's only like 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. Because these people are yelling out there. I remember driving away, looking back at these people on the line. I said, wow. I know workers, especially the Filipino community, are just hard workers. If they can work, they're going to be out there working. So how could they be out here now not working and asking people to stop working and joining them? It took me a couple days to figure that out and talk to people, but it for me was like that first experience I had of civil disobedience, to stand up and against the growers who I was scared at the time, saying, well, the growers going to get mad at us, right? That's what they're going to do, is get mad at us. To say that, we had a right, we had a right to stop and not be, and ask for the things that were important to us. Whether it was clean running water in the fields, clean toilets. I mean, people talk about other things, but there was issues like toilets. They had toilets, but they've been there for months. Nobody would use them. And just to have cold water when it's 115 degrees out there. And then, unemployment benefits for farm workers who work seasonally. How can that be so hard to figure out? But, you have a legislature back in 1965 that were all white male growers, many of them growers, making laws that keep them rich and powerful, and in charge. So, when you think about that struggle of these two groups of people, there were many other groups of people, the large group of the Hispanic and the Filipinos coming together. It was a real Davy and Goliath moment, to take on the growers who thought that they could win because they had the money and they had the courts, right, and the judicial system in their pocket. That's why it's important for people like Rob Bonta, Mark Pulido, is he wrong? Mark Pulido, to start standing up, you know, and to start representing the people that are in our communities. All you young people here, you know, think of running even for president of your class, but then think of running for the school board, you know, and think of running for your local politics. That's the only way it's going to happen. It's your, you know, everyone is passing everything on to you. If you look at the legislature, one of the things that Cesar was very successful in, he brought along communities of people, of Hispanic people that became mayors, that became city board members, and in the legislature. You know, it looks totally different from what it looked like in 1965. The Asian community, you know, they were going to college. You know, they were raising their kids and going to college. But now they're getting in, you know, why, I always wondered why, I did ask some of my friends. He says, yeah, you know, our parents wanted us to go to college and become lawyers and become teachers, and really didn't talk to them about politics. And as a matter of fact, even some of the local people I had talked to said their parents clearly didn't want them being involved because they wanted them to go to college. They knew if they became a part of the movement that they would be at some boycott somewhere, and not being able to go to school. So consequently, we're waiting for you to begin thinking about running for office. And that's why we do presentations like this, right? Is to educate you, to make you be inspired. Look at what ICE is doing. You know, ICE is taking Filipinos, they're taking anyone. You know, doesn't that make you angry? Yeah. You know, find out, but you high school students, what can you do about that? I mean, that could be your parent, you know. I know that ICE will take me if they come and ask me for my papers, because my birth certificate says my name is Lorenza, and when I started school, my mom told them my name was Lorraine. So I have, my documents have different names. So I say, you know, if they ever run into me, they're gonna, and then where would they send me, right? Mexico or to the Philippines? So just small things. They look for any kind of little mistake to put us in jail. And that has happened to a lot of people if you're keeping in touch with the news. But Delano before that was not, it was segregated. You know, the growers had the Catholic Church. They put all those pretty stained glass windows that they sent away from Rome and those statues. You know, and you had, in the west side of town, you had Guadalupe Church, a very simple church. So in comparison, St. Mary's and Guadalupe. And the school, well, yeah, St. Mary's had a beautiful school because the growers wanted their children to be in a special private school.
And we didn't.
Yeah, right. So, and a lot of discrimination. I talked about where I went to school, there were only a handful of people that were of color. I maybe had one Filipino friend and one other mestiza friend, but most of the students there were all white. Well, this was even smaller when I was in kindergarten, up to 4th grade. And, you know, you could, and I went to school with a lot of the growers' kids, because they lived out in the country too, right? And we lived out in the country and the bus used to pick them up. So, you know, I was a part of that discrimination growing up, and I really didn't grow up around a Hispanic or Filipino community. More Filipino because my father and mom had friends in town, and we would go and spend time with them. But it was a real difficult time. But after the strike, people began relating to each other. Now everybody's married to everybody. You can't tell what anybody is. You know, those are the things that, then in '73 when I went out on strike, I then went to work with the union. I worked at the clinic first, for about a year at 40 acres. And then after that, I was asked to manage Agbayani Village. How much time do I have? Okay. Agbayani Village. And I knew all the Manongs. My uncle, we used to go to all the camps for the cockfights and for all the good food. They had great food at those, at the camps.
He did.
But I knew all the Manongs. I was only like 22 years old, and years later, I thought, gee, why did they have such a young woman manage this Agbayani village for all these retired men? And then it became clear to me is that they wanted the men to run Agbayani and not anyone coming in and saying, oh yeah, why don't we do this and let's do this. I was there to do whatever they wanted me to do. It was their home. They, had their gardens where they wanted their gardens. They even had their fighting cocks where they wanted their fighting cocks until the cops asked them to move them. They had their own food, they had their own bedrooms, they had air conditioning, which they didn't have in the labor camps. They had heating, they had their own shower that they shared with one other person. This was like a mecca for them to be in their own home, because many of them couldn't afford to buy homes anyway. Yeah. They were safe there, they had doctors, they had nurses 24 hours a day, they had the service center with staff willing to help them apply for Social Security, write home to the Philippines, open up a bank account, because many of the men didn't even have bank accounts. There were stories of them having all their money stuck in their mattress, and it wasn't until they were dead that people found it. So, true. Many of them didn't speak English very well, so they were pretty isolated and stuck in the labor camps. Agbayani is a big thing. Agbayani gave them their place to have their dignity. It was built by volunteer students, Filipinos from Sacramento, from San Francisco, and someone mentioned that earlier, LA and San Diego, who came here religiously every weekend to build Agbayani, and they would spend the weekends with Manongs at Shenley Camp on what's that road? Shenley Camp was on,
Williams.
Where the county line road.
County line and
that's where the union had rented a labor camp from the Giorgio, so that the men could live there. Remember, they had all been kicked out of the labor camps. They didn't have any place to live. So that was a place for them to live until Agbayani was built. And that's where the students came and got to spend time with them. I go to listen to them talk, and this one person made this video. And you see some of these students that used to come here when Agbayani was being built, crying in tears, remembering the impact that they had from the Manongs, sharing their stories, and knowing that they were here without families and how they'd become their families. So, that's something that's important to me. After I left the union, I had a 30-year career working with the county where I was a career counselor and a manager running youth programs. And everything that I learned from the farm workers were things that I took with me in my job and retired from. And I'm a member of the FANHS here. I'm also a member of the FANHS in Sacramento Delta. And we go into the high school and talk to kids and clubs and talk to teenagers about the history of the Filipino people and how we're counting on you and wanting to mentor you to become our new leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Okay, my brother Roger. Okay, Raj, you ready?
Can you guys hear me? Yes. I'll go get. Look, you know what? Thank you for enduring all this. There's a lot of inspiration. I thought about Bonta, the Attorney General, was inspiring. Mr. Mark Pulido and Dolores and the rest of them. But they talked about the struggles, and it's true. They screwed the Filipinos. But I want to tell this group of San Francisco kids who are falling asleep on me that this is year 2025. 100 years ago or more, they brought in shiploads. I mean, like slave ships from Africa to the East Coast. Well, they brought in shiploads from Manila Bay, from Tacloban, from Davao, from the Philippines to the United States to provide work. Okay, cool. The Filipinos, they bid into it. They loved it. America, you know, money falls out of trees, you know, and you can get pera like it was easy, right? And that's what fooled them. So they came in boatloads, lots of them. There wasn't like 1,000. There was like 100,000 back then. So they come to America, Pinoys, you know, they came out of the ship with suits, you know? That's probably the last time they wore those goddamn things, you know? Because from there, they come to America, they're short, they wore a hat, they look cool, they got flat nose, hindi marunong Ingles. Okay? And what happens? So when they get the jobs, they got all the agriculture jobs that the Puti, Itim, and everybody else didn't want. They gave them the shit jobs. And you know what? That's the reason we went on strike. Because for all those years, they got, okay, the shiploads came from, they even stopped in Hawaii to work in the sugar plantations, but they lived from San Diego all the way to Seattle. I mean, they got Indipinos in Seattle that they married Native American Indians, okay? We got them here in Delano. Because, okay, we were screwed to begin with, okay? We couldn't, first of all, as a Filipino, you couldn't own land until 1948. You couldn't marry until 1948. So you're stuck. And then hindi marunong English, so you were really stuck. So what happens? You got all ag jobs, you know, jobs nobody wanted, you know. Okay, the biggest places, where do they go? I'm going to give you a little history lesson here. In California, they all ended up here in Delano. They ended up in Stockton. They ended up in Salinas Valley. You know why? They got too big. They got water. You look back east there, you look to the east, and you see these Sierra Nevada mountains. They feed the world. We're the richest valley in the world. Per acre, nothing can stand against us. We're so cool. We are humongous. It's almost industrial scale. And guess what? They used us to do the work. Okay, a little bit of history. Back then, they had a janitor in LA got workman's comp. They got unemployment. They got rights. Filipinos, Mexicans, if you're not Puti, what did they get? We got nothing. We got no minimum wage, no overtime, no workman's comp. If you got hurt, you pay your own bill. We were screwed. You get my point? They exploited us. What do you think, Larry and them guys went on strike? To tell them, hey, we're done with this. You know? And you know, Pinoys are so obedient. Takot ko. I'm afraid. I don't want to do this. Or, you know, but after you live in the camps for 20 years, you know, and you're stuck in a room, and you know, eventually you get courage. Just like Rob said, you know, you got to be courageous. You got courage, you do what you do. So Manong Larry, it took a crazy leader like Larry. I knew Larry before he died, and Larry is a kick-ass guy. Okay, Larry had big balls. And you know, Larry goes, Roger, you know, you want to do it, you got to move the community, you got to organize. You know, you got to be tough. So, and it was cool because we used to visit him, me and Alex Edler, our late president, we come there with a six-pack. And we go visit him, and Larry goes, oh, light my cigar, boy. You know, and you know, Larry was that kind of guy, but he taught us how to organize. And the first thing we organized was the Filipino Voters League. And we organized Filipino voters, and we actually got a white guy that liked us, Gene Tackett, who worked for the Peace Corps. And we got him elected to the Kern County Board of Supervisors because he took care of Leroy Jackson, who was a racist. And so it worked. And then from then on, me and Alex organized stuff with Herb. We organized the Philippine Weekend, the Filipino Basketball League, and we're still organizing. But the sun is setting for me. I'm almost done. I'm looking forward to you young people to carry on. Remember, Filipinos didn't go out and do this because it was a cool thing to do. They did it for survival. We were getting screwed. So you gotta have itlog. You gotta kick ass. Otherwise, like Bonta said, if you don't get courageous and do something, they're gonna run over you. Okay, thank you.
The thing you need to know about all these people, they work at one point in time in the camps, and that's a story that's not very readily available. So let's thank each of our speakers and give them a round of applause. We are now going to transition. We're going to have them walk off the stage. We're going to show the Delano Manongs. We're going to get the stage ready. So not ready, but they're going to have them walk off and get ready.
Let me say something about Delano Manongs.
Yeah, we're going to show. And we have gifts for them too.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
The film Delano Manongs
Do something with that. My mom said, did you give them?
was based on a paper I wrote when I was at UC Santa Barbara.
Thank you.
And it was published in 2005.
Thank you.
Marissa Roy read it, and she decided she'd make a film from it. She and I talked about it several times. But it won a national award for the essay from Santa Barbara, and in turn, Marissa's film won numerous awards for bringing the first story of our strike.
Let me give you a quick background of Delano Manongs. If you see all these people here, they're in the movie. Okay, just be aware of that. They're in one point or another, they've been there. So it's kind of a rare privilege to see the speakers, but also present in the film. Another way to tell your story is via a documentary such as Marissa Arroyo's Delano Manongs, the forgotten heroes of the farm workers movement. The documentary highlights the role of the Filipino Grape Strike of 1965 in the formation of the United Farm Workers. Marissa Arroyo is an Emmy Award-winning author for the documentary Seeks in America, and also was her documentary also was outstanding historical program for the Delano Manongs. Here is Marissa Arroyo's Delano Manongs. It's also present on PBS if you ever want a chance to look at it. So at this point, Leslie, let's kind of dim the lights and just get ready for the video. Thank you.
They were affectionately called the Manongs, the Filipino word for elders. Kind-hearted old Filipino men with no families of their own. They had cracked hands from working in the fields. They were quiet and mysterious. On September 7th, 1965, after years of exploitation, these men poured into the Filipino Community Hall in Delano, California, to plan their last stand. Led by Lariat Leong, the men had set in motion one of the biggest labor struggles in American history.
I was not afraid of the growers, I was not afraid of the teamsters, I was not afraid of anybody. Because I know that I was right in what I was doing.
This is their civil rights movement in California.
Huerta, Guimara, Huerta, Huerta.
Come on, Huerta Gimara!
They're gone now. But before they fade away like ghosts into the past, here is their story. In the 20s and 30s, over 100,000 Filipino men flocked to America seeking new opportunities.
Most of the Filipinos that came to this country were induced by very nice propaganda in the Philippines. In my elementary grades, I pledged allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
They became migrant workers and followed the crop cycles all over the West Coast.
They would go to Imperial Valley, and they would come to Coachella, and they would come to Delano, and they would go on to Stockton. You know, they were just very mobile. They would follow the crops. They were migrants.
You just drive into the farm and you just put yourself in the bunkhouse, and they just direct you out to the fields, and that's when you start working.
Most of them came from the remotest area in the Philippines where most of them did not speak English, did not read, did not write. So what they did was choose one of them who could talk to the growers in broken English and negotiate with them.
The thing about the Filipino workers is that they were very united. Because of the social crew structure that they had, they stuck together.
The Manongs lived together and worked together, migrating from one labor camp to another in their tightly knit work crews.
They had skills. They can go down a row when they were hoeing or thinning, and they had this rhythm to it. The way they would just basically take that hoe and just come across, and it was very lightly done, well done. So this is a skill that they picked up in over 20 or 30 years, but they do it on a day-to-day basis.
Very difficult job. You bend all day, from morning till afternoon, you know. And the exploitation, if you may call it, by those in power, the growers, and they call them boy, old men already, boy yet. Boy, come here, boy. What you doing, boy? This kind of thing. Very hard, you know.
Discrimination against Filipinos reached its height in the 1930s, and laws barred them from voting, owning property, or starting businesses. But the most devastating law against the Filipinos was the anti-miscegenation law, which banned interracial marriages.
That's why the Filipinos have a lost generation. That generation, the second generation, is lost. So the Filipinos remain single and bachelors until they died, you know.
Well, let me show you some of my experiences living in a labor camp, especially with a bunch of bachelor men. One of the things Filipinos like to do is they like to dress up, they like to look good. And on Saturday, we finished work around 10 o'clock, and all the Filipinos, they went to the bunkhouse, they went downtown, get haircuts. They're coming back. You can smell that Brill cream, the pomade. It was going on the hair really thick. And all of the suits were in one closet. You didn't know who owned which suit. They just grabbed one to go to these parties, to these dance halls. And there'd be lots of romancing.
They would spend all their money, 10 cents a dance, with these dance hall girls. And at 3 o'clock, they'll start running back to the camps because they gotta be there before the sun shines. And some of them will be in the field with their suits on and with a miner's lamp on the forehead, cutting asparagus.
But you come back on Monday morning, the guys were happy. The guys would be married for a weekend.
I got the ability to make you think I'm pretty. You girls might think I'm ugly, but you talk to me for a couple hours. Huh? How about that?
Larry Itliong, was one of the few Filipinos to buck the system and get married, and not just once, but 4 times. A veteran of the fishing canneries, railroads, and farm labor, he emerged as a leader organizing Filipino workers from Alaska to California.
Larry Itliong is crew-cut hair with a mustache and 7 fingers, we call him, because he had only 7. He smoked all the time with his cigar, in his mouth. Very brave, tough.
My father was very strong verbally, very strong mentally, and very strong physically. He would stand up to anybody and stand up for anybody.
I'm going to be very frank with you. I have all kinds of guts, I'm not scared of nobody. And I'm a son of a bitch in terms of fighting for the rights of Filipinos in this country.
The Filipino workers led a lot of strikes, by the way, in the Salinas area, and in Santa Maria, and in Stockton. They were known to be militant.
They were old school. They were confrontational. You've got incidences where growers are getting shot at, where scab workers are getting beat up, vehicles being destroyed, barns being burned down.
The workers got their increase that they demanded. The problem was that they didn't sign any contract.
It didn't matter how much we struck. We could always get more money, or we'd never get a contract. How many hours we're going to work in one day? Overtime pay? Maybe a work rule where after 100 degrees, you can slow down a little bit. That's what you get in a contract.
The Manongs spent the 1930s, 40s, and 50s working the crop cycle and fighting for a few cents more each season. By 1960, they were older men, and the biggest battle of their lives was about to begin in Delano, California. Delano was the Wild West, a small town divided by the train tracks and Highway 99. The farm workers on one side and the powerful growers on the other.
Delano had a different dynamic than the other places. There was a lot of local Filipinos working with a lot of the local Mexicans, and a lot of these people knew each other.
The Filipino community was pretty good size, and they call it Chinatown. Why? I have no idea why they call it Chinatown instead of Filipino town, but pool halls and poker places and other things.
Though Mexicans and Filipinos socialized in town, in the fields, it was a different story.
Well, in Delano, the growers would keep the crews separate, and they worked in the same fields, but not integrated. You had the Filipino crews over here, and you had the Mexican crews.
The unions were also divided along ethnic lines. Mexican workers were led by Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. Larry Itliong organized the Filipinos.
Larry Itliong came to my camp. He told me that he is organizing Filipinos to go on strike because we needed to have better wages.
For the first 3 months that I worked in the union, all I did was talk. Got home. I got home at 11, 12, 1 o'clock. But let me tell you, my mouth was sore.
After listening to Larry during those meetings, the more I got, upset about the situation.
I feel that they're not being treated fairly by their employers, so they took a strike vote. All right, they took a strike vote, and when we asked for them to raise up their hands for those that would volunteer to picket, only one raised his hand to picket. So we asked them why. Well, they said, we don't want to picket our boss. We've been working for him for 10, 15, 30 years. We don't want him to get mad at us. So I said, well, forget about the strike. You go back and work.
How long have you been working here now, 20?
25 and 20 years.
How many years?
I think maybe almost 20 years now.
Almost 20 years. How many years you been over here now?
1959 when I
1939. Well, let's see. What you worked up in the Northwest? We're in Alaska.
Alaska,
Yeah, working on tuna. Then he goes up on asparagus and then comes back down here. It's all right. No, Mariano's been around a long time and another faithful worker. Okay, that's not a gun. Don't worry.
Do you think your employers have been fair with you?
Well, in my behalf, yes, but in general, it's not so good.
Do you own any property?
Just a car. Just a car.
Everybody was getting so mad, because it came out that the growers were disregarding our demands.
Couple of days later, they come back again. They wanted to have another meeting. And, well, we meet again.
September 7th, 1965. In their twilight years, and with everything to lose, Larry and the Manongs poured into the Filipino community hall, ready to put what little they had on the line.
They decided unanimously, we will strike. And then said, tomorrow morning, be here at 3 o'clock.
The next morning, the Manongs met out in the grape fields, pretending that it was a normal workday.
We pick the ripe grapes and trim it and then move on to the next vine and do the same thing. At noon hour, there are a lot of picked grapes under the vines. That is when about 1,500 Filipinos went on strike against the grape growers in Delano.
Matapos ang prawning, matapos ang begging, magbibigaran ay sa baboy. Yan ang mga old style. Di ba tayo makabili sa ganon kung ang ating kalagayan ay magpabuti? Yan ang isipin ninyo.
As they would over the next several years, the growers used intimidation and violence to crush the strikers.
They turned off the lights in the labor camps, they turned off the gas, they turned off the water, so the workers wouldn't be able to even cook for themselves. Some of them were beaten up. There was so much violence.
The first time I saw one of the workers getting beat up, I was probably about 5 years old. So, and being afraid, seeing the police come and harass some of the farm workers, and at a young age saw the distinct line between white and brown.
You're asking me to answer off the cuff now. I don't care to do this.
Okay, let me ask you this. What do you think of the idea of a union for farm workers?
I think it's ridiculous.
The growers like to play off the races or the ethnic groups. You can always break a strike. If the Mexicans are striking, you call them the Filipinos, you pay them a nickel more. Of course, then when the Filipinos go on strike, then the Mexicans are going to cross over and they're going to scab our strike. And they're going to make the money. So no one ever really wins.
I think September 13th was the Mexicans were crossing the picket line. So we thought, well, how are we going to stop these guys?
Where are your brothers and sisters over here? Come on! Come on out!
After a week of violence from the growers and Mexican workers crossing the picket line, the Filipinos were losing the strike.
Talk to them in English, they don't speak English. We don't talk Spanish, so we have a hell of a time trying to communicate with them. And so that's when I started thinking that maybe, have those issues on Chavez.
Ed Leong then goes up to Chavez and says, look, we need your support. And Chavez says, no, I can't give you my support. Ed Leong says, why not? Chavez says, I'm not ready. Well, wait 2 or 3 more years. But then you got to remember the Filipinos were getting old. And for them, for every penny, for every quarter, for every dollar, for every lug that they got paid extra, that went into the retirement fund. And Ed Leong says, no, we go on strike now, and you join us, or when you go out and strike, we're going to break your strike.
After years of the Mexicans and Filipinos being pitted against each other in the fields, Larry was pushing for an immediate unified strike.
It was just a very scary moment. But we met a week later on September the 16th, and then we took our strike vote.
And the place was crowded because they're speaking mostly Spanish, and then somebody would translate to English for the rest of us. Pros and cons, why they should support the Filipinos or not support the Filipinos. So I just went outside. I was with some other guys just tossing pennies and everything else. You know, it was a bunch of other Mexican kids. And every once in a while we hear some clapping and everything else, and then all of a sudden I heard a sign, you know, si se puede, and I heard, vamos en huelga. Let's go on strike.
And I was there in the Filipino hall, and all of a sudden I saw the Mexicans coming in, you know, joining us for breakfast. For the first time, the Filipinos and the Mexicans were together, fighting for the same cause.
That Filipino hall became like the center of our working together and eating together and you know, getting to know each other was really, really beautiful.
We were all brothers and sisters in one organization. There wasn't, well, you're the Filipinos and you're the Mexicans, you know. We were all one brotherhood.
Mexican and Filipino workers merged together as the United Farm Workers. Larry Itliong became second in command under Cesar Chavez.
Nobody exactly was going to happen. I mean, I think all of us thought that it was going to be a short strike, but it didn't happen that way. The growers fought back very fiercely.
Weeks became months. Months became years. What had started as a walkout by a small group of Filipinos became a boycott and a nationwide movement.
It's a basic question of hope for the future. And that's what this committee is dedicated to try to do something about. We're going to try to improve not just your lives, but more importantly, the lives of your children.
Or the Grape boycott. Well, I've classified that in the past on a number of public occasions as immoral, and I think it is.
Talking about recognition, you're really talking about the guts of the union. We're not striking for a wage increase or for a pension fund. We're striking for the very elemental things of labor.
Now, what's happening is that you get all this national publicity coming in, but it's focused on the Mexican workers. All the volunteers are going there. All the organizing is happening there. The Filipinos are not the spotlight for the strike.
To hear what's going on, and the newspaper and TV and everything is done by Mexicans. Nothing is done by Filipinos. So naturally, Filipinos started drifting away.
And as time went on, many of the Manongs began leaving Delano to continue working the crop cycle in order to survive. In 1970, 5 years after the Filipinos walked out of the fields, one of the longest strikes in labor history, the growers finally agreed to recognize the United Farm Workers Union and sign a union contract.
Larry Itliong, what do you have to say about seeing grapes at the stores after all this time?
Well, I think that it's great, and thanks to the co-op store that have been supporting the Grape boycott, to help bring about justice and dignity on behalf of the farm workers. And unless you see this label on the box that sells the union label grapes, then you don't buy grapes.
But as the Manongs returned to Delano for the new grape harvest season, they found themselves marginalized from the work.
The Filipinos discovered that they had the bad end of a contract, being part of the United Farm Workers, when they went back to the union hiring hall the day after strike was over to get their job assignments, and discovered that they couldn't get the jobs because they weren't senior enough in this new union.
The new union rules favored the local farm workers and not the migrant workers. So many of the Filipinos lost their jobs. Worse still, the farmers closed the labor camps, so they lost their homes.
I think deeply that a lot of these guys, I think they had a lot of respect for Cesar Chavez. I think that's the reason they didn't want to say anything negative. Because, you know, they had accomplished something. They had a union. They had a farm workers union. But I don't think it was in the image that they wanted. They didn't control it. We started it, we lost in the end.
To tell you the truth, I never take this that I've been taking in this organization. But I do it because I think it's bigger than me for the farm workers to have an organization. The reason I do it.
I remember my father being upset. I remember him on the phone with the other Filipinos saying that, you know, we're not being heard and we're getting pushed aside.
Finally, he called the press conference and he said, I quit.
Larry continued working for the Filipino community, and he left behind a vision of a retirement home for the Manongs. In 1974, just 3 years before his death, the UFW built the home.
We put out the word, and sure enough, we got a lot of people who come and help, you know. Then hordes of people would come on the weekend, and they were all put to work, and that's the way it was built.
Just like a family, we have our disagreements, but in fact, basically, we all do agree that all people should live better, and we know that we are all brothers.
What did you think of the celebration today?
Oh, it was one of the most exciting points of my life, because that celebration has given me hope that I'm going to be in a home that I might call it my own, our own, yeah.
They had a little garden, nice rooms, and where they can stay.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to do today, Joe, if you could, is if you can let me just listen to your heart before you have surgery and afterwards.
I'm going to give you a skin test for tuberculosis on your arm, okay? Right in your tattoo.
The Filipino men were really generous because they had no children of their own. They adopted the kids, you know, us. I remember I'd be out there in the fields working during the summertime, and they says, you know, Junior, says, you'll never be a good hoer. You need to go to college. And I said, well, you know, I can't afford it. And they said, no, we'll save money for you. We'll save money for you. When I graduated from high school, they helped buy me a 1964 Buick, brand new. And inside the glove compartment was $500. Now, this is collected by all the men that I called uncle in the Salinas Valley. And they had hoped that I would be able to go on to college to be something someday. They lived through us. They lived what they didn't have through us.
Little has changed at the Filipino Hall since the days of the farm workers' strike. It's still a gathering place for the local, diverse community. But today, the new generation of Filipino Americans and their families gather to celebrate and commemorate the ones that came before them, and tell the story of the Manongs.
Because of you, love is sweet and tender, and this my love I will offer you. If you really care for me, all things to you I'll be. My heart is ever true because of you.
Yeah, here. Why don't you share a few words, and then we're going to show the documentaries, and then we'll also talk about Chris, what's the status of Chris also, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do a quick talk, and we'll just show the video.
Okay.
So we'll show this video after he's done, Leslie, okay?
How's it going, Brad? Appreciate the opportunity to share this film with the folks today. The song, Prophets Enslave the World, was based on a poem written by Manong Philip Veracruz. And for me, that music became a point of connection from my generation of college students in the late 70s and early 80s with that generation of farm workers that came before us. I had the great honor and privilege to meet Chris Bautista, the guy who put the poem to music, and we put together a short film about how that music came about. In the cut that you're going to see today, it actually includes two short films. The first piece, well, number one, let me apologize on Chris's behalf.
Yes.
Because he was supposed to be here today. He was actually going to do a live performance of his song. Unfortunately, he hurt his back and was not able to make the drive from Oakland out to Delano. But he does send his regards, and we're going to show two pieces today. The first piece is a little bit of background on Philip Veracruz himself. I know that a lot of folks were interested in hearing more about Manong Philip, and so the first piece is an interview that'll give you a little bit of the flavor of the type of man he was and the way he was dedicated to the labor movement. And then the second piece focuses in on how his poem was converted or created into a song put to music by Chris Bautista. So we'll go ahead and hit the lights and show the film.
See, the farm workers movement started long time ago. It did not start with us here in Delano. The union is a good thing for the farm workers, but leaderships can make mistakes. Now, that's why you have supposed to be a democratic union in order that you can discuss fairly and honestly the issues involved. That's why you got meetings. That's why you have an organization. Otherwise, if you think alike, you don't need any more organization. But then if you don't allow people to express themselves, how the hell do you know what you got? You don't know, right? So that's all what I'm saying. When it comes to the union, it's good for the workers, but it got to be run right and honest. When somebody calls you a monkey, somebody calls you a Chinaman, somebody calls you a Jap, when somebody calls you that shit, you know, you go and knock his head, then let him, and don't give him a chance to say once more. I have suffered in this goddamn country for a long time, and I have the right to say what I think and I feel. And it's not that I hate this country, but there are some people, that are not doing the right thing. But the young people today, they're uniting, And of course, when it comes to progress, it should not be limited to our people. And so therefore, we got to fight for our rights, And if we have to lose our lives for it, we got to do it. And that's the only way. I will never stop to enslave you until you tell them to go to hell. That's it.
Still across the ocean, a third of the USA. So thrilled by wild imagination, I left for Manila Bay. Then on my way, I thought and wondered what the future would be. A jumbled parental care enveloped in search for human liberty.
Philip Veracruz is well known as an icon of the Filipino-American experience, and his work as a labor leader and organizer helped set the stage for the creation of the United Farm Workers Union. After arriving in the United States in 1926, Philip encountered hardships and struggles. Long hours, little pay, no voice or power in the workplace. He saw workers facing abuse and exploitation, and witnessed the broken hopes and dreams of so many of his fellow workers and immigrants. He wrote his feelings into poems. One of those poems, Prophets Enslave the World, became an eloquent testament of his experiences in America. In 1973, Prophets was put to music by Chris Bautista, a young Bay Area musician and community activist. The song became an anthem amongst many Filipinos of the time. The song connected them with the generations of activists who came before.
During those times, there was a movement, and this was a product of it. And we sang the song Prophets Enslave the World at the first Asian Student Union, Asian Pacific Islander Cultural Week.
And, you sing Prophets Enslave the World, not just because it's a beautiful song, but the message. You always start with the message. You always tell what the song is about. We always say it was written by Philip Veracruz, and this is about the experience of Filipino Americans, and here it is.
I was just so overwhelmed by the poem itself, the lyrics, what it meant, and the song itself. The song is beautiful.
The first time I heard Prophets was during my freshman year. The song came directly out of the Filipino-American experience, and it hit me at a time when I was hungry to get rooted, to build a foundation of identity and purpose. Chris Bautista agreed to meet me at Delano, at Ogbayani Village, to talk about the song. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with Philip.
Yeah, well, me and him, it was almost like vinegar and water. He loved coming to my mom's house because she's Ilocano, he was Ilocano, she cooked Ilocano food. Yeah, he would come over to me and just talk to me. And he would go into his thing about talking about how he wouldn't take any crap from the foremans and other people that ran the fields. He was really defiant down here on subjects of just the whole farm workers situation. Me, I was just totally oblivious until I came down here. When I started working at Bayani, it was like, wow, you know.
So when you discovered that poem, all these experiences, sounds like
it all came together. But it's a very powerful song.
Absolutely.
And everybody's told me about it. You know, that's really powerful, Chris. You're saying something. And I said, well, the guy who wrote it has gone through so much in his life that he's expressed everything in poems.
I'm very curious about what the process was that brought you, well, that gave birth to that song.
Well, I was at my sister's house, and she goes, hey, check these poems out. So I took her guitar, went into a room of comfort, and that's where it was birthed. And then I started playing it, and then I started going, while still across. Hey, that sounds good. Mm-hmm. And then it just came out, and then I came outside after I was done and played it for my sister, and she goes, I'm going to call Joey. And I go, why? He needs to listen to this song. And he heard it. He gives me a call and goes, Chris, I heard this song, and I understand it's from one of these poems from this farm worker, and I think you should play it at their benefit that's tomorrow. I go, where's the benefit? He goes, it's at the Greek Theater. And I go, yeah, right, Greek Theater, you know, because I've seen concerts there. You know, he goes, just meet me backstage. The stage manager goes, hey, stand right there. I'm standing there with my guitar. And he goes, you're next. And I just got to look at him in shock, because I peeked over the stairs and I see all these people out there. And I'm going, this is for real now.
Was this your first time?
First time ever playing the song, ever performing in front of all these people. So I start off the song, and I sing the first line, while still across the ocean. You can hear a pin drop. And by the time I got to minorities in shanty towns, people were starting to, you know, acknowledge what the whole poem or the song was about. By the time I finished it, I got a standing ovation.
Right on.
Yeah, I was close to tears.
Sounds like it was the right song by the right musician in the right moment.
At the right moment. I don't know about musician, but at the right moment.
And then you're just, whoever is playing the rhythm part just
While still across the ocean, I heard of the USA. So thrilled by wild imagination, I left for Manila Bay. Then on my way, I thought and wondered what the future would be. I gambled parental care and love in search for human liberty.
While still across the ocean, Slavery.
hearts for all to see. Inviolable Garden of Eden in the land. Pause. Slavery.
What's today's date? Today is January 28th. I just played Prophets Enslave the World with Chris Bautista. So,
it's just me.
Yeah.
All right. That was nice. I like that.
I want to emphasize, like, a lot of Culture Nights play this song, Filipino PCN Culture Nights. Just be aware of that. Like, I know it happens in San Diego State a lot. Good.
Yeah. No, I think the song, it really caught the spirit of the movement at that time. And for a lot of us who were there, a lot of us who were a part of that student movement, this sort of became an anthem. This became a representation of an experience that connected us as a college generation to the work that the farm workers had done to pave the way before us. And so the song and the poem, when they combined, it was like bringing two different experiences together. When I put this all to film, my hope was that we could continue to introduce newer generations and younger generations, not necessarily to my beautiful singing voice up there, but rather to the movement that this was born from. Want to do a quick shout out. We actually did this at the parking lot of Agbayani Village, not too far from here. We had gotten there unannounced, and so Lorraine Agtang was in the office trying to hustle up some space so that we could utilize some of the one of the rooms inside the village. And at that time, we said, "Well, you know what? We're here. We have guitars. Let's play some music." Turned on the camera. We played it. If not for the truck that went by in the back, it would have been a perfect take. And maybe that makes it the perfect take. Who knows? But I think that for me, the ability to share this moment, the moment of this song with current generations really gives us an opportunity to emphasize the importance of telling our own stories. Because we're in an era right now where our histories, number one, our histories were never really recorded, and so it's up to us to put our histories into the record. And now that we've begun putting our histories and our stories into the record, we're in an era where they're being erased. And so I think that it really challenges us to step forward, assert ourselves, uplift these stories, attach them, recognize the connection that they have with our experience, and continue to build on that movement. I think it's fantastic, as Brother Mark was talking about before, that the Manong Philip, Manong Larry, Manong Pete were included in the Department of Labor Hall of Honor. I think that's important to recognize that. But it's also important to recognize that the reason that they were there is because we, as a community, began recognizing their importance, and we began to uplift their story. We need to continue doing that, not only with the farm workers, but with every aspect of the Filipino-American community here, whether they be Navy men, whether they be nurses and health workers, whether they be casino workers. We need to be able to recognize and celebrate that our stories are worth telling. And it's up to us. All I had was a camera and an idea. All of us are able to do it, to celebrate the oral traditions, the history of our communities, simply by talking to our elders, simply by talking to each other and recording some of those conversations. That's the way we gather this body of history, this body of information that preserves our experience for future generations.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Yeah. We're going to go on a Mariana break, but I want to emphasize a couple of things, especially some of the people out there, the youth. Alex Fabros wrote a poem. Philip Veracruz had a poetry also. Somebody made music toward it. They did a documentary. There are stories out there, but there's ways to preserve it and say it. And that is a challenge I'm having for all of you. Like, there are stories out there, but find a way that you want to do it. So at this point, we will have the food trucks available from 4 to 5. There are food truck pop-ups located by the cafeteria. There's also the Filipino Realia room located in the band where you can find a Grape. Yes, we have the tools that are out there. Newspaper articles, Johnny loves Realia, and posters. Please start walking back here by 4:45 because we will probably start at 5. The key thing is get a chance to eat, come back, we'll wrap it up at 5 o'clock, and the showcase will be Larry the Musical. Please take the time, relax, get a chance to break. Some have to need to go to the bathroom, but we'll see you. Start walking back at 4:45, okay? If you have any questions, Joe Barada's here, Alex Fabros is there. If you want to talk to anybody, please come, and Roger Gadiano's over here. They're all here, talk if you get a chance. Thank you, everybody. But take a break, Marienda time.